Hello everyone, I'm Sahid. Thank you for clicking this video. I'm very happy that you're here. So today I'll be continuing my chapter series on Blessings by Chukwuebuka ibeh. And today I'll be reading part 1, chapter 3. Before I start my reading today, I like to do a brief intro slash summary of sort of what I've read so far and sort of focusing on the last chapter that I read. First of all, if you're new here, I also want to say please kindly watch my other videos and the other chapter videos about this book, as they give you a bit more idea of sort of what this book is about. And yeah, and I also want to say, kindly keep supporting to those who have been subscribed, who have just been watching my videos. I really appreciate it. Thank you for your this deep support, and I hope and I look forward to seeing you, supporting my other videos as well. Okay, so Blessings is by a Nigerian author, chukwuebuka ibeh, who I recently sort of, started getting into more. I found out about him in, I believe, 2024, and I saw a few reviews about this book, and so I decided that I would also, take the initiative to also read it myself. And I'm very happy to be sitting here with you guys and reading this book and sort of talking about it with you guys. It really means a lot to me, specifically because this book is about African stories, queer stories, teenage stories, and yeah, I feel connected to all these themes, and I that's one of the reasons I chose to start reading it. And just with the 2 chapters I've read so far, I've just been moved by it. To begin, I want to talk about some of the main characters that we've been introduced to in this book. The first person I would like to highlight on is Obifuna. Obifuna is a boy, a teenage boy who, lives in an Igbo household, a Nigerian household, to be, more specific. So within his household, he has, obviously his parents. The father is Anazi and the mother is Uzamaka. These are, very, I would say, traditional Igbo parents. And, before I get into sort of how their household has been portrayed through, the first and second chapter, I want to talk about his brother, Ekene. Ekene is his younger brother, and he's 13 months younger than Obifuna. And just reading this book, we can see that they're sort of opposite of one another. And in chapter 1 of part 1, we were also introduced to a boy. A boy is this boy who recently graduated secondary school, and he's the son to one of Anaozi's sort of old friends, and Uzo Amaka also happens to know, I don't know if it's necessarily friend, but like a family close relative or something. And so our boy is the son to Okezi, and unfortunately Okezi has passed away, and so Anazi brought him to live with their family. So he brought a boy to live with Uzamaka, Obifuna, Ekene, and himself, and Ozzy. And so they are, first of all, Anazi didn't inform Uzamaka as we read about in chapter 1. And so when when he brought a boy to the house, she was, slightly, confused and sort of, I guess, trying to confront Anazi that, we didn't inform me about this. Why are you bringing a stranger into our house? And Anazi sort of was defending that due to the fact that, okay, Z has now died. His family members has been dealing with a lot, and so they wanted to, give a boy better opportunities and a better chance of life. So that's why they were hoping, he could kindly take a boy into their home, and so he did so. And but that's not the main thing I sort of want to talk about now. I sort of want to talk about Obifuna. Obifuna is the main character, and in my other videos, I sort of mentioned how I would feel connected to him. And in my last chapter video, I mentioned how Obifuna is just somebody I felt connected to, just reading. First of all, how he, as a child, was seen as special. As a child, he just loved dancing. As a child, he, many people sort of said slight comments like, oh, he should have been born a girl because he had, dimples, flawless skin. He just looked very beautiful, and many people found him as a beautiful child. And, he but over the years, we noticed that, when he starts to go to school and sort of see how society are towards people like him, he starts to become more reserved in a way, starts to become more shy. He keeps, sort of keeping more to himself due to maybe, bullies who were bullying him because of his characteristics that weren't, I guess, conventional as his, sort of mother. That was the word his mother used towards the end of chapter 2, part 1, that, she sometimes wished she was a little more conventional after we had, an occasion in which his father slapped him for dancing at a party, and he sort of confronts him saying, are you a woman? Are you, excuse me, I'm trying to remember the quote. I'm not exactly saying it right, but I believe he said, are you a woman in a man's skin? And it was just, when he sort of slaps him, and then, this left Obifuna really sad. But yeah, to sort of come back to chapter 2, I found it moving just reading how Obifuna name was given to him, and then how, during, or prior to Uzamaka's pregnancy, she dealt with certain miscarriages, and how just giving birth to Obifuna was very special to their family. And then also later reading about how with Ekene, it was a different story because she unfortunately, almost lost her life when she was having Ekene, and he used, when he was in her womb, he wasn't in the right location. I believe she had to get a C-section, if I'm not wrong. She also just went through a lot of just pain during his pregnancy. So after he was born, she found it hard to find him special in a way, and she almost found it as a curse in a way, that she almost died trying to have this child. And yeah, so it's just completely opposite from one another. And we know also that part 1 is currently set in Port Harcourt in 2006, and so that's sort of where all this is sort of taking place. But yeah, as I continue to read, I mentioned in my other videos, I want to see how the families relationships are in African households, it's complex, and I want to sort of read more sort of about the complexity, and obviously from the summary of the book, I know he's gonna end up, later being sent to secondary school because his father sort of catches him. So I'm sort of wanted to get to that point, and I'm not in a rush, but I'm really enjoying so far how um, chukwuebuka ibeh has sort of slightly put me into the story, and sort of how I'm grasping the different characters, motives, emotions, and I'm just really curious on reading more about that, and just how, um, the other ways I will feel more connected to Obifuna, because I think he will be really special to me, um, particularly because I'm Nigerian. Also, I'm a teenager, and I'm also queer. So I want to read more about his sort of journey, and reading stories that are yours just make you feel good. So I'm really excited to read more, and yeah. So yes, I'm just gonna get right into chapter 3 of part 1, and I really appreciate that you're here. Part 1, Chapter 3. It was difficult for Obifuna to imagine what their lives had been prior to a boy's arrival. It seemed as if, with a boy, Obifuna's life had finally begun, a life he had been waiting to live. A boy appeared to fit effortlessly into the fringes of their existence, as if a space had already been cut out for him, waiting for him. He fit into his new role at the house without the sense of bewilderment Obifuna had expected. Taking on his assigned chores with charming grace, in the mornings Obifuna woke up to the sound of a boy's heavy footsteps on the stairs as he hauled water from the public tap downstairs to fill the drums in the kitchen. As Obifuna swept the floors and Ekene washed the plates from the previous night, a boy had his bat in preparation for heading out to the market and opening the shop ahead of ngozi. Sometimes, whenever they managed to get ready at the same time, a boy offered to walk Obifuna and Ekene to school, suffering the consequences of having to take the longer route to the market. It was only on Saturdays that he stayed home until noon, doing Anazi's laundry for the week in the yard downstairs. Obifuna liked to watch him from the railings. He was in perpetual good cheer, steadily whistling a happy tune under his breath. Sometimes, sensing Obifuna's presence, he looked up and gave a small wink that made Obifuna smile, delirious with happiness. A boy was at ease with his new life, eager to assimilate. His English had improved in the 10 months he had been with them, and he no longer had to repeat Uzamaka's instructions over and over when he was sent on errands, or take a moment to ponder a response when Obifuna or Ekene spoke to him. And he was a wonder at the shop. Obifuna sometimes listened as his father extolled a boy's agility to his mother, commending his initiative, which sometimes brought extra profits. A boy had, by observing a special practice in other shops, suggested Anozi undertook the task of home delivery for bags of cement in order to add the cost to the purchase and get more gain after having split the profit with the delivery man. Anozi was impressed by how well a boy ingratiated himself with the customers, so that even long-time customers now wanted to be attended to only by him. Anozi bragged about a boy's certain future success. He would easily make a name for himself while still serving, which would be invaluable when he was free to start up his own business. The boy has not a single dishonest bone in his body, he declared, and went on to tell the story of how, as part of the customary test for new apprentices, Anozi had colluded with fellow trader who posed as a customer and overpaid a boy after making a purchase. The man had been stunned to speechlessness when the boy, on discovering the error, ran a whole mile to refund the extra money. Anozi, too, had deliberately placed money in the pocket of clothes to be laundered, only to have it duly returned to him, not a single note missing. That boy, ah, a wonder, I tell you, he concluded approvingly to Uzuamaka. She made vague, sleepy sounds of attention, not sharing her own stories if she had any. Obifuna could not tell what his mother felt for a boy. She was courteous to him without being friendly, ultimately regarding his presence as a passing inconvenience. Only once did she raise her voice at him, threatening to slap him when he spent too long on an errand and came back with the wrong item. She sometimes complained too when he skipped night baths. He spent all day in a sweaty stupor, hauling bags of cement onto lorries, and came home coated in a film of white dust and exuding the metallic smell of limestone. Even his eating pattern was curious. He cleared away the grains of white rice on his plate before licking the stew, and his molds of fufu were large as a child's fist. Obifuna and Ekene had giggling fits watching him swallow them in one gulp. He sometimes put on a show to entertain them, flattered by their keen interest. He laughed often, a sound that came without warning, like the soft, almost reluctant rumbling of thunder after a light rain, making something flutter within Obifuna. Other times he moved around the house in a brooding silence and spent minutes at a time looking into the distance. Obifuna yearned to know what he was thinking in those moments, but he never asked. They didn't last. Soon enough, a boy would emerge from them with a puzzling animation, recounting his adventures in the village, stories that Obifuna did not know whether to believe, such as how he climbed trees with one arm tied to his back, and how he walked miles from the river with 2 gallons of water hoisted on his shoulders and a third on his head, without losing a single drop. He frequently talked about his future plans. When Oga settles me, I will open one big shop in this Port Harcourt, and it will be the biggest shop in the whole world. Although he laughed when he said this, there was a force of conviction in his voice that told Obifuna he believed this himself, or believed in his ability to try. Obifuna wondered if he had a girlfriend in the village, if he thought of her often, although a corner of the room had been designated for a boy's use with an old mattress retrieved from his parents' room. Obifuna sometimes woke up early in the morning to find a boy in bed with him and ekene. The feel of a boy's erection straining against Obifuna's thigh from underneath the shorts he wore to bed, his eyes closed, the soft snore from his lips, an indication he was truly asleep, completely oblivious to the state of his body. Once Obifuna woke up to the sight of a boy's forehead next to his breathing warm on Obifuna's face. Up close, Obifuna could see the wide flare of his nostril, his burgeoning fingers slightly over the width of his face. His fingers lingered on the lips, tracing their hard texture, trying and failing to shut out the voices in his head. He inched closer, unable to resist the force that pulled him. A boy's lips were hard and firm. A boy stirred, his eyes still closed, but in the ever so slight curve of his lips, Obifuna detected a smile. In the morning, a boy did not talk about it. He showed no inclination to recall what had happened the previous night. Obifuna watched him go about his chores, avoiding Obifuna's gaze, leaving the room the moment Obifuna walked in. In a boy's eyes, something had dimmed, something between them had cracked, and when he looked up the following Saturday to see Obifuna watching him, he simply looked away. Did a boy now hate him? Had he imagined the smile? A boy seemed wary of coming close to him, but there was also something in his demeanor that told Obifuna a boy was not exactly repulsed by him. There appeared in his carriage a half-heartedness, as if a boy felt the spark Obifuna felt, and his fear came from the thought of the consequences. Obifuna imagined a boy's future. He could be the owner of a big shop in the market and would have amassed enough wealth to come back for Obifuna, and they would run away to a hidden place to be together forever. He turned away from washing plates one Saturday morning to see a boy watching him. "You have been holding that plate for an hour," a boy said. "Do you have a girlfriend?" Obifuna blurted out. A boy raised a brow, but he did not seem surprised or puzzled by the question. He eased away from the wall and came to stand beside Obifuna. "Are you jealous?" he asked. He was smiling. "Me? No, I just..." "Shh." A boy placed a finger on his lips. He stared Obifuna sideways so that Obifuna was facing him squarely, a plate and a soapy sponge in his hands suspended in the air. He looked into a boy's eyes at the dark, tiny pupils in the midst of the vast whiteness of his eyeballs. At first he saw nothing, only a mesmerizing contrast of black on white. And then he saw his reflection in a boy's eyes, witnessed his own smile. There was a stall in time, an instant when Obifuna was convinced it was himself and a boy alone in the world. It was a moment he wanted to live in forever. They were interrupted just then by a shuffle, and when Obifuna turned, he felt his heart stop at the sight of his father standing by the door with his hands behind him. There was no doubt he had been there a while, had seen enough. The moment lengthened, the silence brittle. Have you finished washing the clothes? Ngozi said, referring to a boy, but his eyes rested on Obifuna, and they never left him, even as a boy walked the length of the kitchen with his head lowered, brushing past Anozi at the door, even as Anozi reached behind him to shut the door with a firm click, even as he reached for the nearest thing he could find, a cord lying helplessly on the kitchen worktop. And that is the end of part 1, chapter 3. Let's talk about it. Okay. So part 1, chapter 3 sort of starts with us sort of getting to know more about a boy. We start with the author mentioning about a boy's arrival and sort of how since a boy sort of arrived into their home, it was like they already sort of created a space for a boy to live in. It's like there was just an empty spot just waiting. Like he just came at the perfect time, and he sort of furthers on that by explaining how since a boy has been living with their family, he's been helpful in the house with doing certain chores, as well as helping with errands, helping Anozi at the shop, and yeah, and sometimes helping go to the market, which is also part of errands, and yeah, and also reading about how Anazi sort of praises a boy, sort of characteristics, his hard work in the shop, and his trustworthiness. He emphasizes on how when a customer sort of this one time when a customer overpaid a boy, he quickly ran almost like it wasn't more than a mile or half a mile to make sure to go give the money back to that person. And also this one time when I know he purposely left money in one of his jackets when before our boy did laundry, a boy brought back the money without any missing sort of money, as they said in the book, without any missing note of paper money. But yeah, I found that really important that they sort of highlighted on that, because that shows that a boy is a very trustworthy a man or boy, whatever you want to call him. He has graduated secondary school, so maybe he's probably still in his late teenage years. But yeah, it was interesting reading sort of them emphasizing his trustworthiness, and then later we we also sort of get to know more about Obifuna and a boy's relationship. Obviously, since since a boy arrived, Obifuna has had certain looks at him in a way, but we get to really see sort of more of their relationship in chapter 3. It started with sort of when they were all in the bed, because I believe maybe due to where they live, they all have to sort of share a room. And so Obifuna, Ekene, and a boy were all in the bed together. As maybe typical Nigerian brothers, like all sleep in the bed together. That's something a lot of like Nigerian people did. I remember as a child, it was fine when I would go to like sleepovers to do that. But yeah, this was something that sort of gave Obifuna a more opportunity to, I guess, be closer to a boy. And we have a very descriptive part of the book in which he sort of is. It started with feeling a boy closest by, and then also sort of um, Obifuna letting his intrusive thoughts take over, and he started sort of touching using his fingers to touch a boy's cheek, and at some point touching his lips, and I found that interesting because I did not expect that, but that sort of shows that he has some sort of attraction um towards a boy, and we also sort of read more um about how a boy slightly smiled, and then the next day when they woke up, he was trying to sort of avoid Obifuna despite knowing what happened the previous night with what Obifuna did. And Obifuna at first was sort of slightly feeling ashamed in a way, and feeling like a boy now sort of felt weird about him. And then later on we have a scene where I believe Obifuna was washing dishes, and all he could think of was a boy, and how he was just imagining things. And then later a boy sort of was I think when he noticed or looked back, he noticed a boy was watching him, and then a boy sort of goes to make a statement that, oh, you've been holding that plate for more than an hour, sort of emphasizing on the fact that he's been sort of dozing off, or not dozing off, but sort of pondering away while washing dishes and thinking about all the things. And so a boy sort of mentions on that, and then Obifuna just quickly gets this urge to ask the question he's been thinking about: do you have a girlfriend? And so he asks that question, and then a boy sort of slightly smiles and passes away. He doesn't really answer the question, but he's like, "Oh, are you jealous?" And then they have a moment in which it seemed like they were having a deep connection with one another. Like, it started with sort of Obifuna seeing his reflection through a boy's eyes, and sort of feeling and thinking, of a world with just him and a boy. And it was just really funny reading that. Not necessarily funny, but it was funny, and it was also kind of special because teenage boy thinking about a future already with obviously this person that he is attracted to, and just reading that was quite kind of emotional. And then when it got more emotional for me, and kind of like I was kind of shocked, was when a boy's father sort of was just standing there in the back watching them as they were having their little moment. And then in his head he was sort of thinking, I wonder, sort of wondering how long his father had been there, but he probably was there for a while and didn't say anything, and probably saw the little moment that they were having. And so he at some point spoke up and said, have you finished washing the plates? And then and then that little moment was kind of like worrying, because I was like, oh my god, what is the father gonna do? And towards the end we see that he was looking around for a cord, and that cord was most likely to use to beat Obifuna for what happened in the kitchen, that little moment that they had. And that was kind of unfortunate reading about. Excuse me, it was unfortunate reading about that, because I'm just like, oh yeah, he's about to get a whooping, and I wish he didn't catch them sort of having that little moment, actually, because he wasn't even doing what he was asked to do. And imagine a strict African house that was doing that. Oh yeah, that's gonna you're gonna get a beating for that. But that's kind of sort of what chapter 3 of part 1 was about. I hope you enjoyed this video. Thank you so much for your support. If you enjoy this video, please kindly subscribe, like, and comment. And I hope to see you in the later chapter videos, as I will continue this chapter series all the way to the last chapter, which I believe is chapter 28, and I hope to see you there. Thank you. Bye.